Our cover story tonight is a story that concerns all of us at a personal level. Jobs, or more precisely, the lack of jobs. Do you know why we take such a strong position on China? Why we keep saying, make China pay? Because when all of this is over, when the curves have been flattened, when the virus has been tamed, we'll all sit down and count the losses. And you and I, in our individual capacities, will not be able to demand compensation from the perpetrator, China. So governments must act and make China pay. And tonight we've put together some numbers to convince these governments. Numbers that should give you an estimate of what this pandemic has cost us. Lives and livelihoods. All of us, each and every one of us is a victim here. The pandemic has caused an economic collapse, and that's an understatement. Half of the world's workforce is on the edge. That's over 1 billion people. Facing an uncertain future, each day we're waking up to the news of layoffs. Companies with the strongest hope of weathering this pandemic are downsizing. Unemployment rates are soaring, but the billionaires are getting richer. So let me start with them and the country that has the highest number of billionaires, America, more than 700 billionaires, 700. Together they control wealth worth more than $3,000 billion. During the 11 weeks of the lockdown in America, they have grown richer by $500 billion. That's an increase of close to 20%. $500 billion. There are 12 zeros in a trillion, just so you know. And this is the other side. These surely are dark times. In the last 3 months, more than 42 million Americans have filed for unemployment benefits. This number does not include millions of self-employed workers. This while the billionaires swim in their pools of cash. Jobs created since the 2008 financial crisis were wiped out in 3 months. But the billionaires have only grown richer. Over 20 million jobs were lost in April alone. At the time, the unemployment rate stood at 14.7%. Now, all 50 states in America have begun to ease restrictions. And here's the result. The US has added 2.5 million jobs in the month of May. The unemployment rate has declined to 13%. It's still a very high unemployment rate. 13% is a historic high. But that did not stop US President Donald Trump from patting his own back.
People are now starting to return to work. So it's been an incredible thing to see. It's been a beautiful thing to see. The experts predicted that the economy would lose tremendous numbers of jobs. And of course, from the beginning it has, but you're going to see how fast that's made up. I'm telling you, next year, unless something happens where the wrong people get in here, this can turn around.
The picture is not so bright as it is made to look by global leaders, including President Trump. More companies are planning job cuts. Those who had to take pay cuts are seeing their savings deplete each day. The pandemic is still here. So the risk of debilitating illness and death remains. Despite Donald Trump's optimism, the International Labour Organization has said the highest rate of job losses will be in the Americas, both in the North and the South. An estimated 300 million jobs will be lost due to the Wuhan virus. 300 million. The report says the youth may be playing catch-up in the labour market for the next 10 years. Across the Atlantic, surprisingly, the unemployment rate is half of that in the US. This is the UK. In April, the jobless rate stood at 6.6%, thanks to the short-term work programs. These are more common in Europe than in the US. The program lets struggling companies retain employees while reducing their work hours. The government then pays a part of their salary. And talking about struggling companies and the UK, the auto industry is among the worst hit. Job losses in this sector alone could cross the 6,000 mark. Iconic car makers are laying off people. Aston Martin, 2,000 jobs gone. Rolls-Royce, 3,000 jobs. Bentley, 1,000. Globally, there are some 3.3 billion workers. Of these, 2 billion people work in the informal sector. In the first month of the pandemic, most of these 2 billion workers in the informal sector saw their income drop by 60%. And this is particularly worrying for developing economies like India and countries in the Southeast Asia. Also Africa. Mass unemployment has become the new normal in Southeast Asia. In Vietnam, which is quickly rising as a manufacturing hub, 5 million workers have lost their jobs in the first 3 months of the year. In Thailand, 6 million jobs will be lost in the tourism sector alone. Same is the case in Africa. Nearly half the jobs will be lost. In India, meanwhile, more than 2 crore jobs were added in the month of May. But the unemployment rate stands at 23.5%, 23.5% according to the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. With the easing of restrictions, most of the small traders and daily wage laborers are returning to work, and they account for a third of the total employed population in India. So in the coming weeks, India's unlocking plan could add more jobs. What about China, the home country of the pandemic? Official data is always controversial and often fudged. The National Bureau of Statistics says for April, the unemployment rate is 6%. But a Chinese brokerage firm estimates that unemployment in China is more than 20%. 6 versus 20, who would you believe? As usual, the Communist Party took offense to numbers that did not suit it. The brokerage firm was made to retract the report. Global Times even launched an investigation to tell the world that the official data is reliable. Well, you wouldn't have to do it if it was reliable.